All right, y'all. We here, we live. It's the Black Factor. And I'm your host, Brian Forbes. Y'all know me. Let me first say, welcome Black Factor family. Welcome my Oh So Smooth Radio family. And we getting ready to get it in, y'all. We're going to have a real live conversation. We have a special studio guest. A very special studio guest, I might add. Mini-Me is here. And we're going to have a very deep conversation because my mini-me is very much a person who is well studied in particular areas of paleontology, genealogy, and other things like that. So we're going to talk about a couple of things that come up in society, particularly in the black community. And we're going to have a discussion about that. I think you all will enjoy this. So be sure to get your tea, get your, all your stuff you need. And we're going to get it in, y'all. Here we go. All right. So, let me introduce none other than the mini-me. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Tatum Maya Forbes. Say hello to the people, Tatum.
My whole government name.
Yes, your whole government name, my dear.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hello, Black Factor audience.
Yeah, so, Tatum, tell us a little bit about yourself,
Well, I am the local devil's advocate.
Yeah, local devils. I like that one. I'm gonna have to remember that one. The local devil's advocate. Okay.
Yes, that cat lover.
Cat lover.
Yeah, that's about it.
I can't tell you left your cat with me.
Well, it's hard to travel with a cat.
Yes. Well, I guess I should be grateful that you are of the traveling kind. That you don't mind moving about the world and getting.
Thank you for babysitting. You've been the best.
See, y'all hear me talk about my grandcats on this show. This is one of the people who have left me with a grand cat.
Blessed. You were blessed with a grand cat.
Oh, I was blessed with my bad, y'all. Y'all heard that right? I was blessed with a grand cat. Okay. So Tatum, tonight we're gonna talk about indigenous people of America, and some of the things that have created the ideas, I guess, and environment that we have today, where people are, I guess, a little confused sometimes. Because the title of the show is, so you have Indian in your family. And I don't particularly care for that terminology, Indian, especially since, what was it? We just came off of, what is it called? Indigenous Peoples Day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Formerly known as Columbus Day.
Formerly known as Columbus Day. So, help us out here. What is it about our people, black folks, who tend to gravitate toward the mindset of saying, I don't think you hear it as much as you used to, or correct me if I'm wrong, I got Indian in my family.
Right. I don't know. Do you? I don't know.
I haven't heard that. I guess you don't hear it as much. And I think maybe it's because we have so many different things going on socially. Right. And people have learned more. They now embrace their blackness more, I think. Mm-hmm. Is that, can you expand on that for me?
Right. Well, I feel like, being black and having indigenous ancestors, it's not just my feeling, but it is a fact. They're not mutually exclusive things. Like, one does not cancel out the other. They can simultaneously be true.
Coexist.
They coexist, right? For a lot of people. And I don't know, a lot of people do know that their families are both. Like, there is no this or that. It's not such a black and white situation. And I feel like often, we are so busy talking about other things that we don't necessarily get to delve into this like one area of like Black American genealogy. And anytime someone does, there is a tendency for there to be like a little bit of pushback. I feel it. Sometimes some pushback. And maybe not so much now. I don't know. There used to be, I can think of times like growing up, like there was definitely pushback. Like if you said, like, hey, when they're like, well, why would you say that? Or there's a whole list of things people say, like when someone will be like, I got Indian in my family, and then that it usually starts a chain reaction of things that are said, and it just depends.
So, well, help us out, help the audience out, help me out to understand. And I know y'all have to understand, when you live in a household, you have lived in a household with a child like this for as many years as we cohabitated. There is you tend to get a lot of information.
Right.
Sometimes stuff you understand, sometimes stuff you don't. And I'll be honest, I have to admit, as a parent, it's pretty refreshing when your children are trying to explain something to you, and you have to actually study to think about what they're saying. It's kind of like role reversal, where the student becomes the teacher. So tell me, in terms of genealogy, because I did write into the title of this particular show, paper genocide.
Right. Can
you give us some history about what that means and how that is? Where did that idea come from?
Well, it depends. So our glorious country started as 13 colonies, and every colony has a different history. But Virginia is usually ground zero for colonial law, and so some of the officials there, one by the name of Walter Plecker. I encourage everyone to Google that man, Walter Plecker.
Walter Plecker, be sure to Google him.
He's one of many people that did this, but he was he was a proponent of eugenics, and hold on one second. We did a whole show where I talked about some of that eugenics and some of the things that went on with that recently. So y'all be sure to go back and check these shows on YouTube now, and don't forget, y'all, hit those like, subscribes, and share buttons. I'm sorry, Tatum. Go ahead. Yeah, no, it's totally fine. So he was really into eugenics, like people tend to be at the beginning of last century, and he was like, Virginia's got a lot of these, Indians hanging around, but they look kind of Negro to me. So we're gonna get rid of them, and to do that, what he did was basically like, if they had one drop of so-called black blood, which was at the discretion of the vital statistics department, or when the family would go to get like some medical care or whatever.
Would that be at the discretion of the particular agent that did the vital statistics?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there's like a history of this kind of like in different places. It just, we have a long history, which I think sometimes we forget.
Val Wells says start with 1870 census.
Okay, that's the first census after enslavement. Now, see, we can circle back around to that because that's like a whole thing. But so yeah, Walter Plecker was like, what, to make these tribes extinct, if you will, we're gonna be like, hey, y'all look like Negroes, so we're gonna classify you as Negro, mulatto, black, colored, but you will no longer be, you can't stay on the reservation. You're not gonna be an Indian. Can't call yourself an Indian.
Okay, so in light of them not calling themselves Indians, what exactly did they do?
People were then classified as black, mulatto, colored. And that's going to look different for every state. I know in the case of someone in our family, one of our foremothers, she was classified as mulatto, and she is quote-unquote Indian and black, or Negro, as we were called at the time, which really doesn't mean anything, because even the Negro could be someone that would, like, it could be a variety of people, which I think a lot of times, like, we don't understand how many different types of quote-unquote black people make up Black America.
Now, with that said, and this is just, a sort of a point, black folks, black women, being the mother of Mother Earth itself, have the ability to give birth to everything. I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, black women have the most complete mitochondrial DNA on the planet.
I don't know. Well, I was like, I don't know if it's all black women, but because you could still look black, but your mitochondrial DNA is like something else. So
Okay.
that's a whole rabbit hole. You could look one way, but that mitochondrial DNA is saying something else. It's like, well, actually, you're Scandinavian. Like, something crazy like that. It's like wild stuff. But for the women that do have a particular set of mitochondrial DNA genes, yes, like they are referred to as like Eve, like oldest mitochondrial DNA, like first humans kind of stuff.
Okay. So I'm trying not to go too far down that rabbit
Yeah, 'cause
hole.
that's another show.
There's so many rabbit holes here. You got to be careful. Okay, so then the declassification of indigenous on this continent, did that not lend numbers to what we know as slavery, or what we know as because you hear these different things about how many slaves were actually brought from the motherland, and then you have to, when you start to weigh those numbers against the actual slaves in this country, aside from the ones who were actually born here, does that not cause a discrepancy?
It absolutely causes a discrepancy because America is one of the only slave-holding regions, North America, or when I say North America specifically, the 13 colonies, United States, what's now known as the United States, they specifically they imported about 1% of the slaves were, I do believe, like imported. And even that is like sketchy because a lot of those people were imported from various different places, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll say they were imported from Africa. Like the bulk of them, the majority of them were imported from Africa, but America had a very active and strong domestic slave breeding program, and if they weren't breeding people, they were kidnapping folks who were free, who
Now,
were
that's
sometimes
something that they don't talk about a lot, that the breeding programs that were in place in the South, the breeding farms.
Yes, they were.
Okay.
I did not realize to the extent of it until I went to an exhibit in Skokie, Illinois, and basically all the slaves were coming from like the Northeast, and they would take them down south.
So then, in fact, the number of slaves that were within the United States, say toward the end of slavery, there could only be so many that were accounted for in terms of importation versus breeding.
Yeah,
in America.
Yeah, most people were quote unquote bred.
Wow.
In America, like there was no importation. Like they were. I do believe I read something from a book excerpt earlier, which we can post in the show notes. I think it was like from 1680. Like that was the first batch of born here slaves, which is that's before the Constitution was even signed. So if you put that into context, like that's kind of crazy. So like from the door, they were already.
And in fact, that's prior to them actually outlawing the importation of slaves, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It is.
So they was already ahead of the game then.
They were. It's really
kind of
weird.
like how people who started growing weed already, even though it's not legal in some places.
Yes, they have already
ahead of the game.
It's not funny, but yes.
Yeah, no, it's not funny.
No, it's really terrible.
Okay, so then during this time when they were using the census, it was a way to so basically they took people who were, I don't want to say free, more or less, and actually turned them into slaves just by classifying them as black.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's kind of like a different time period. So first you had like the tribes, and I feel like I should put the disclaimer in here, like none of the tribes that lived here looked the same. Like everybody had their own stuff going on, their own clothes, like their own tribal tattoos, language, and that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. And so a lot of the ones that were darker or had kinkier hair, they would be like, well, looks like an African, we're gonna say it's an African, even though it wasn't. See, they could also get more money for African slaves than they could Indian slaves. But a long story, it just depends on the tribes too, because like some of the tribes would fight against the colonists or whatever, settlers, whatever you want to call them, and then they would lose, and then they would get enslaved.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of different stuff going on like all at the same time.
Okay, so here's something that I noticed. At the last Million Man March, Minister Farrakhan they had a large contingent of indigenous Americans at that event, and they discussed this very thing about there being a mixture of black and indigenous, and in fact some of the so-called black that had been classified as black were actually indigenous. Sort of a bringing together of the two. Is this something that needs to be looked further into?
Absolutely. I think it's if you're American, you need to go log on to your ancestry account. You need to start looking at the census. You need to see what your family was called. It's going to change. I know in our family, it changes every 10 to 20 years. It just depends. Or it depends what part of the country they're living in. And they change classification. And one of the gentlemen, Jay Nightwolf, that Farrakhan featured, and his niece, I think. But there's an interesting interview up on YouTube if you guys just like search at Jay Nightwolf and Farrakhan. And the guy says, he's like, a lot of y'all, meaning black people, and he looks like, a quote unquote stereotypical Native American, which everyone is like used to seeing and identifying as Native American. And he's like, a lot of y'all are misclassified basically, and that you are indigenous. And Farrakhan kind of was like, like, he was like, but he didn't really like touch it too. He was like, there's some commonality, but he didn't go down that rabbit hole. But it was just interesting. The guy like kind of hit him with that, and he was like, oh, okay, so there is some overlap, and I think that's where that whole, you got Indian in your family, that people get sometimes upset. It's a generalization. It just depends. Or people don't want to talk about it, or they're like, oh no, my ancestor wasn't indigenous, they think they were white. But there is something there that needs to be explored, I feel like, for the sake of like to make cultural wholeness and restoration of cultural boundaries and understanding around us. Because I feel like there tends to be a mainstream story where we only tell part, and I say we, but just whoever our leaders are, the people we listen to at the time, like they only tell part of a story, even though there's like this whole under. It's kind of
annoying that that history is only told in parts and portion. To give people to bend history and bend the truth toward the direction that a person wants it to go in. So let me ask you, in terms of genealogy, and how accurate or how do you feel about these genealogy tests that people are taking now, and these ancestry tests and these different things?
I don't know how I feel about them. At first, I was like, they're kind of stupid. Like, I don't see why anybody would do that. Like, it's not genealogy. It's not genealogy. It's like cute little I don't know. Like, it's like a little party trick. That's how I looked at it. But it is good to help people find like their family members. Like, oh, this is my if you're adopted or something like that. It's a great way to like get in contact with your family. But as far as being able to tell people's ancestry, it's something I think they can't actually do, if that makes sense, because for example, they'll pick like a region, let's say in like Europe, but it's called France now, but it used to be Gaul, or that was the Roman Empire at one point, so it's like, where and what DNA are they comparing this to? Are they digging up the graves of the ancient people that lived there? Like, where are they tracing all of this?
That's a good point.
And to an extent, they probably are sometimes, but I don't know. It's just like a weird thing where, and maybe we need to look into it more. But from what I've seen, they kind of pull the DNA samples out of the population that keeps submitting stuff and like calibrates it. But it's not necessarily the original populations of the land, if you will. If that makes sense.
So then, okay, so the genealogy, I guess the test that people take and on the side of genealogy would probably be more, I guess, more useful in terms of finding family members rather than their lineage or where they came from.
Right.
Is that right?
And I don't think it's useful. Now, this is what I've seen, because I just go like lurk and look at the DNA results. And it's interesting because a lot of what I've noticed, like black Americans will cluster for Asia, and what is that?
It wasn't Asia though, but didn't Asia have a large populace of African descent historically? Well, I'm talking about ancient.
Yeah, technically, I don't think they are. I don't know. Yeah, for the sake of this conversation, yes, we're gonna leave it there. Yes, people that we would quote unquote call African or black or whatever, but they're Asian. So yeah.
I think there are regions in Asia where the people there have a darker complexion, sort of like the places they have in Mexico, where they have people who look like straight up black folks, and they kind of keep them. They're like a hidden culture.
Yeah, they're dying off. You know, like that's the reality of it. Their lands have been taken over by, for better purposes, like what we call mixed race people now. You know, they are not representative necessarily of the ancient people, but they do have those bloodlines. You know, and they continue to intermingle among each other while the ancient people like languish and kind of die off like in the background. You know, and that's the case all over Asia, and including down in Australia and all of those like Polynesian, well, that, you know, for the sake of this conversation, Polynesian islands, you know.
Okay, so you and I were talking earlier, and we were having a discussion where I talked about a story that I did on this show a while back, and I spoke about there was a point that I made in the show where I said that by 2045, the population in America would no longer be predominantly Caucasian, and that it would be people of color, and that by 2060, I believe it is, there would be every child born under the age of 18 would all be of color. I think there was the working populace by 2045, something like that, would be predominantly black. Now, you kind of disagree with me a little bit now, and it has to do with people's identity, like what people identify with. And because we have so many that are of Hispanic origin who identify as white, and I find it interesting when we pick up applications now, you'll see on those applications where it says non-white Hispanic. So in other words, you have Hispanics who identify as white and those who do not. How do you feel about the future in terms of people of color as it pertains to this country, provided this country even survives that long?
Well, first let me say, my own personal feelings, do not like the people of color term. It doesn't, you know, doesn't mean anything, because we're all like tribes, you know, we're all tribes and nations. You know, the thing that has kept Black America together is like we all agree that we're black and we identify like with our different folk ways and folklore and culture. You know, we understand that. I feel like more people coming in from other places, okay, sure, like quote unquote the WASP Anglo-Saxon type of white person will not be the majority, but they never really were, if we're being honest. That's why, you know, we had the huge influx of Europeans in the 19th century. Like they had to up the numbers because it was mostly Negroes that was majority of the country, and they needed more white people here.
And so that's why we now only make up what is it, 8% of the population, 7-8% blacks, and it's just amazing how many different divisions there are now, and how many different groups. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be hiding in the background like the black people in Asia. We'll be like a footnote in they're like, well, yes, they used to exist here, but we don't really know what happened to. I'm just being dramatic, but they'll just be like, we don't know. There used to be these people here, and I don't know. They're gone now.
So do you have anything that you want to convey in regard to the black populace in America and where we are and where we should be going?
I think the number one thing,
in terms of our own existence.
Yeah, like people need to. Me personally, genealogy is important to me. I felt like, how can we progress forward when we can't even agree where we came from, or somebody was lying about the story, which is why, going back and reclaiming your ancestors regardless of who they were. I feel like a lot of times in our community, we don't want to talk about, like, we're basically like triracial. We're a triracial, like, ethnic group. We only exist in the United States. Like, if you dropped us off in Africa, we would all be looking around like, what, or dropped us off in Samoa, we're like, all right, well, what, we have, I'm not gonna say we have nothing in common with a lot of other groups of people, but we have been isolated in the colonies in this United States for so long. Like, we are our own ethnic group, we have our own culture, we've got our own music, we've got our own style of dress, we've got our own language, and, depending on what part of the country you're in, that's even different. But I feel like people need to preserve our ways. We've been taught that like we're, it was backwards. It's bad to be a farmer, even though our farming is what made this $1 billion empire. We're
Right.
like, I don't want to grow cotton. I'm not gonna pick no tobacco. I'm just saying. Like, so now people my age, we're like, what? Like, I don't know what any of that stuff is. I wouldn't even know where to begin to know what to do with any of that kind of stuff. But that used to be like big cash crops, and the crops from the Americas, that's those of us that have indigenous ancestry, that they grew, that sustained them for thousands of years. They now feed the whole world. Like everyone eats corn. Everyone smokes tobacco. I was in Paris. I'm like, what? Oh, I smell cigarette smoke everywhere. Everybody's still smoking cigarettes. It's 400 years later. You know what I'm saying? Like, since the colonists came here, settlers came here to take the crops from here. Cotton, that's indigenous to America. Like, well, a strain of cotton.
Because most of that stuff was exported to those countries.
Tomatoes, we associate that with Italians. That's from America. Potatoes, we associate with Ireland. Potatoes are from the Americas. And we have, I guess we've just lost connection to our roots, like this particular part too. And I feel like we need to accept that we are Americans. A lot of our ancestors were indigenous as well as African and various types of European, and we are unique to this country, and we have a way of life.
Unique to the globe, I think.
Well, yeah, we are. And we are our own. Often people will be like, but y'all are African, and it's like, and there's different motivations, I feel like, for why people say that, which I can get into if you want, but that's like a sidebar. And it's like,
actually, I'd like to hear that. But before you go there, right quick, I'm gonna hit you with this one because I know this is gonna get you.
Okay.
Lorenzo Terry says the so-called blacks are actually the tribe of Judah according to the scriptures.
I feel like we should open this can of worms. I personally, I'm not going to say that there are not people here that come from that tribe, but I don't think, it's like the Moor thing. It's like, yeah, some of our ancestors were Moors. But it's not everybody. Nor were those the majority of the people. And from the door, like, a lot of the indigenous people were what they call praying Indians. So they went straight into the churches. They did not, they weren't necessary. But I've seen evidence, so I'm like, could be. I feel like a lot of people came here. Like, I feel like a lot of people were moving around the globe, and that's something that people don't really want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Now, Regina Freeman says, I'm 5th generation American. Why do I have to identify as African American?
Exactly.
And I think that is the
like,
point.
We're some of the OG Americans. Like, not even, let's just take the indigenous part out of it. Like, we won't even talk about that part, right? But just the fact that we are an ethnic group, like, the only other people that would compare to us are, like, the settlers, like Jamestown settler type folks. Mm-hmm. Where they are their own ethnic group now too. Like, we have all been here isolated for so long. Like, we have more in common with each other than like any of us have in common necessarily with like Europe or Africa. Mm-hmm. Not to say that there won't be some genetic overlap or cultural overlap, because of course there is, because those people were here, but like, we are original Americans, and it is what it is. And I feel like more of us should, like you were saying, what should we do? We need to be like, we're American. Don't hyphenate me. Especially, people whose family just got here, like 1955. Like, come on now. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different frame of mind, and it's one that we aren't given, I feel like. Like, I didn't grow up. That's something I had to, like, it was a conclusion I had to come to. Mm-hmm. But it was, we're always like, I'm not going to wave the flag. It doesn't represent me. Like, this isn't my country. I'm going back to Africa. Like, just stuff like, that's what I heard, like, my friends.
Wait a minute. I didn't raise you that way.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you did it, but it's just like, that's what everybody was on in my friend group. Like, that's how we all, had those conversations. And it's like, then you realize, you're like, wait a minute. Like, this don't apply to us, really, but,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, there's so many different directions we can go with this.
Does anyone want to ask some questions? Anybody have questions?
Well,
or unless you had something else, or you want me to go into like why I think people really want us to focus on.
Let's take some questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them out there. Regina Freeman says, I can't go back to somewhere I've never been.
Exactly.
Well, that's a nice sentiment. However, I do know somebody who got actually sent to a country, actually was born here in America, but was deported to another country after a criminal act and had no idea what to do or how to survive in that country. Didn't speak the language or anything. So
that's terrifying. That would be so bad.
Right. Well, what about like, for example, the colonies that was set up by the British for Africans who had escaped slavery, or those who wanted to go back to what was the name of it?
Like Liberia and Sierra Leone.
Yeah, and Sierra Leone. What I mean, I guess that would be a whole separate culture then again too.
Yeah. Oh, in Nova Scotia, they're also like an offshoot. I've heard there's a soul food restaurant in Nova Scotia, which one day, really? When we're allowed to crawl back across the border, I'd like to go check it out. I'd like to see when we get our freedom papers and we get to go move freely again.
Get your papers.
Yeah, but what about them? Like, what about all the groups?
Well, I just think it's interesting, and I guess the other thing too is, while it's important for us to know our history, we still have to remember that we have a future that we're gonna have to live, and even though we need to know where we came from moving forward, we have to also understand that things are not going back to anything. They're not going back anywhere. We're moving. We're constantly in a forward momentum, and as long as that's true, it's up to us to decide or to make the difference in where we are headed socially. So that's a thing.
I say everyone.
So let's go back to the. I want to go back to the other question. The tribe of Judah. What do you think about that?
That is out of my wheelhouse, to be honest with you. Like, so I'm not even gonna really touch that. I've seen the arguments people have made, and I'm like, could be, I don't know, because I just don't know enough. I haven't looked into that. Like, I deal with like what the tangible, like what we can, what I'm saying. That's more of like on a spiritual aspect. But like I said, it was lots of people here. Like the Moors were here, They say the Chinese were here. I don't know,
Yeah, well, it's been said that the Moors were actually trading in the Americas long before that idiot who got a whole holiday for being lost ever got saved by the indigenous of the land that he got lost in, because of the currents or something of that nature. I need to do my homework on this.
Yeah, there is some type of, I think you have to go down. I don't know. I don't even want to touch that because I don't want to say something that's not right.
Well, I thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that alone. Maybe the currents. That is something we need to look into, though. Like, we need to, and allegedly the Moors, because then we have to get into the Moors' history and like who they were, seafaring Africans, if you will, or European/African,
so
like a hybrid group.
While I have you here, and I figure I want to talk about another topic right quick. Let's jump. I want to jump topics, and I want to do this only because I know you know this stuff, and I'm gonna go ahead and
set me up.
Pick your brain. Yes, I set you up. Let's talk about matriarchy versus patriarchy.
Oh no.
In the world. Let's go back.
Let's
go back. Let's talk about the time when the matriarchs were actually the ruling class.
Ooh, that was a long time ago. But first, like a really long time ago.
I mean, if you think about it, the way things are set up now, we automatically under the assumption based on religion as well as just general life and the way things are done. We are all under the assumption that the world's always been ruled by males.
I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to.
Lorenzo Terry says, "Have you read the book Rudolph R. Windsor, From Babylon to Timbuktu?"
I have not. I know the book. I have not touched that book. It's on my to-do list one day.
Well, you know what? Look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna put it to you like this. Well, my daughter has an extensive library, books that you don't even know exist, and some of them that cost more than your car.
Yes, I have an obsession.
Yes, an obsession. I would call it that.
Someone is tired of moving them across country, though.
I bet.
They're heavy.
So you wanna tell us anything about the matriarchs? Just give us some quick points. Just skim across some stuff.
Well, in the beginning, in the most ancient times, when humans were, you should say, more evolved than they are now. God was a quote unquote woman, or at the very least, let me not say woman, female, feminine energy, or androgynous. Those are like the two kind of like default ancient things. And then from there, it was like, well, women are the creators of life. Like that's God status, basically. Like that's God stuff.
If you think about it, that's true.
Because men love y'all, great, awesome, really, really needed now. In these days of patriarchy. But back then, it wasn't like that. So, actually, speaking of extensive books and books you can't get, I have this book called The First Sex. It's like $600 on Amazon. I happened to hunt one down that was not $600 because this is what I do. But it's called The First Sex, and they actually talk about, so like the benefits of matriarchy, like women can do what they want, will do what they want with their bodies, do what they want with their kids, like move
not
freely.
According to this government, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's why I said we've kind of devolved in some ways. It was all about the mother and her children, and the men were kind of an afterthought. You could get, the women would be like, I'm gonna turn my tent, different cultures though, but they would be like, hey, I'm gonna sit your shoes outside, we're divorced now, and that's in different, like the Bedouin culture. And so, like, in the Bedouin culture, and that's from, like, what we now know, like, Saudi Arabia, like, up in that region, the women, like, owned the tents, and they would tell the men, like, you can go, whatever. So it was like that in a lot of cases. It was like that here in the Americas. Well, some of the tribes are matriarchal. The older tribes, if you will, the more Eurasian tribes are patriarchal, but that's that's a rabbit hole we won't go down. So anyway, like, basically women ruled things, the first queen of Egypt, allegedly. Now, this was years ago, so I can't provide receipts for y'all. I'm so sorry. But a friend and I came across this article from this archaeologist, Egyptologist, whatever, and he talked about his theory that the first pharaoh was a woman. But when I tell y'all that I cannot find that link no more, I don't know where it went.
And I saw something that kind of tied in the mythological character of Wonder Woman with a matriarchal society.
The Amazons.
So the Amazons, and they kind of did their own thing, but it's in as much as it's supposed to be fiction, there's some reality to it.
There is, like I was saying, that book, The First Sex, they actually get into how, I wish I would, because I know we're going to talk about this. We could do another show if you want. They talk about how, like, one of the trials for Hercules, like, in Greek mythology, he had to kill one of the Amazonian queens because the women apparently were so out of control. See, this is where like, take a dark turn. Well, the women were like, men aren't, ish, but in the reverse, because they ran everything. They owned all the land. They owned the kids. They decided the laws. Like, the men are kind of reduced to the status of like women have now. All they were good for was breeding, and then they were kind of sent off to do like drudge work, like go clean out the chamber pots, like kind of thing, like, or go. It's funny, but it's like, this is how it was, right? So in that book, they talk about how, like, even the word for man meant, like, I'm using this example, like dog, lazy dog, like in a lot of languages, like it was bad. So like, I think the men got fed up and they're like, you know what? We've had it up to here. Now we have patriarchy. Along in story. You think? I think the women were abusing their power, which is just how humans are,
that's human nature. People tend to abuse power. That's a natural.
They were wilding
thing,
out.
I think more so now than ever. People get into power and people become. You know what? I told somebody the other day. I said it's amazing how people, when they get into positions, they tend to abuse their position. Like, just as an example, you go to a light company and you go in there to pay your bill, and they're in there behind all that glass and they talk to you crazy and treat you some kind of way, and you're like, you ain't nobody, you know what I mean? And,
right.
and it's just like, that's just them exercising a power that they have over you. And in similar situations, whenever you need something from someone and they're in a position to either help you or give you a bunch of headaches, it depends on what side of the bed they woke up on that morning. So it's kind of the same thing across the board. Some have more power than others. Some can actually make your life miserable.
Yes.
Sandy Paris Thompson says, absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And that is absolutely the truth.
It's true.
So we got a note from the producer in the midst of the show that we should discuss how a person would go about beginning their search for genealogy.
Yes.
I think that's a good topic.
So Yeah. So first things first, you want to get your ancestry.com account. Then,
Y'all heard that ancestry.com first. Get you an account.
oh my God, the other website will come to me. It's ran by the Church of Latter-day Saints. Like if you Google it, it
Really?
should. Yeah, they keep a lot of the records. Isn't that interesting?
Huh.
And they've been uploading a lot of the stuff to the internet. I can't think of the name of the website. It'll come. Hopefully, it'll come to me. Because it's good to cross-reference with Ancestry. But you could just start with Ancestry. And then the first thing you want to do is look up your parents. You want to get their birth certificate, their death certificate. If you know where they grew up or where they were born, what county, what state, you want to go.
LDS Genealogy Bank?
No, Family Search. There it is. FamilySearch.org is the other website to look on. Got a lot of great information. So first you want to start with your parents. You want to get their birth and death certificates. See, and then you can see what they're racially classified as, which is always like an eye-opener. If they served in military, you want to get those papers. You can call, like, I don't remember where you called, but you just Google the military branches, and they'll tell you where you need to go. So just call your local VA, and they'll help you out. So then, you start with your parents. Then when you look, say for example, you look at the census, you'll say, okay, it's 1945, in let's just say Clarksdale, Mississippi. It says this many people live in the house. You can cross-reference it and be like, all right, I know for a fact this is my uncle, my aunt. Here's my parent. Here's their parents' names. Boom. Then their parents' names you can cross-reference and keep going back. And sometimes on the death and birth certificates, they'll have, I noticed with a lot of the older ones, it'll say, just looking at our ancestors, it'll say like where their parents were born. So then that'll help you cross-reference too. So it'll be like, all right, my mom's mom, Clarksdale, Mississippi. So then all right, we're 2 generations into Clarksdale, Mississippi. And usually in the South, you can still find people in the town that have that same last name. So if you want to pull up on the people and, kind of do more research.
You gotta pull up.
Yeah, because you really do.
Hey, cuz.
Yeah, like, hello. Because, you are related. So some people might have more information, but then you go to, like, once you know what county your family's from, then you call the state and county records. You can go to the local library, get a bunch of information. There's usually a historical society for every town, every city, every state, different levels. And you contact those people and you kind of cross-reference, and then you can go like find land deeds, marriage certificates. And now we're in 2021. A lot of this old stuff is getting uploaded to the internet. Like recently, because we'll go and do our genealogy pretty frequently, or just check in and kind of see what's updated. And a marriage certificate of someone from 1824 finally was uploaded to. Then I was able to call the county that they got married in and be like, can you guys send us a copy? And they were like, sure, not a problem. And then boom. And so you just keep going back and back like that. It's kind of like it's like an endless mind game. You just have to slowly work your way through it. It's a rabbit hole for sure.
Very interesting. Yeah, I know you all have been working on the family stuff for quite a while, and I'm impressed by the progress that's been made. Sounds like a wiener chicken dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, it is almost time for us to conclude. I wanted to say that I am happy today to be able to share this show with my offspring, my me over there.
Progeny.
My progeny.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun, Tatum, and I appreciate
it's been fun
taking the time out to hang out with your dad on the show.
Always.
And drop some knowledge for us, because
Not a problem.
won't be like you when I grow up. One of my babies, y'all. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna go ahead and conclude the show today. I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to think about why we identify the way we do. And this has been just sort of plant some seeds here and there to give people the ability to not be so definitive sometimes when we decide to choose what we identify with. We've dealt with an identity crisis in Black America for a very long time. We have not had control of our own image forever. In fact,
Never.
exactly, never.
Never.
There's never been a time in this country where we have had control of our own image. The things that we see through media and the things we have seen historically that have been said about us, that have been shown about us, that anytime we object to negative images and negative ideas about us, we are then the ones referred to as being racist or wrong. So I often would like for people to take the time to think about the reasons why we do things and why we say things and why we identify the way we do. Because if you go and you actually think back and you start doing your own homework on yourself and on your environment and on the reasons why you think the way you do, you will often find that it's wrong. That it is not rooted in anything tangible or substantial. And so then it gives you an opportunity to wipe that slate and start to figure out where the proper building blocks belong as far as what you are, who you are, where you came from, and why it's important to know. Because if you don't know yourself, how do we then bring our children forward in the world? Do we continue to generationally give them misinformation so that they remain in the same situation that we were in or our ancestors were in, or do we give them the information that they need or help them to understand their own history, the beginnings of their family in the truth of it, so that they can move forward with a level of clarity and not misunderstanding and confusion and make things right. Correction. It needs to be corrected. We all need correction on some level in some form or fashion, because thus far, many of the things that we think we know simply are not right. And somewhere, sometime, that has to be fixed. So, this show has been nothing more than food for thought. And I think that if you gain anything from it, then we've done our job. And I again want to thank my special guest, Miss Tatum Forbes over there.
Well, thank you for having me, of course.
Thank you for being here. She's visiting me, y'all. I don't know for how long, but she's got news to produce somewhere in the world. So
Yes.
we have to let her go and do her thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out and hanging out and kicking it with me for the show. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the like button and the share button on Facebook and all of the other platforms that we use. Just, keep up with us. So, also, before I go, I encourage as many of you as possible to shift over from the Facebook platform to the YouTube platform. And the reason why is because last week, I did the show about the United States interstate system and the racism on which it was built. And Facebook quite hastily took that video down. Now, the truth is the truth. They used an excuse, a copyright excuse, in which I used nothing in that video that had any kind of copyright infringement. But they used it anyway. They have since put it back, but I don't like the idea of that much control over the content. I also will be beginning to upload these videos to my own website that has been up for some time. It is theblackfactor.com. We will start to move those things in that direction, as well as include the audio on my blog network that I also have had for some time. We're going to begin expanding the availability of this information, because things like Facebook they're becoming more of a burden. So I encourage you to use those other platforms, particularly YouTube. Please subscribe and be sure to keep up with the show there if we should discontinue on Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I love y'all. And I'm going to go hang out with my kid my kid over there. And y'all have yourselves a great night. And we are out of here, y'all. Peace.